Welcome on everyone, followers of De Wereldmorgen. De Wereldmorgen, that's the world tomorrow in English, the progressive news site in Belgium, in the Dutch language in Belgium. Today is a cloudy day in Brussels, but we won't let that get us to us. We have the honor of receiving Fiona Ben Chekroun. She is the coordinator for the BDS campaign in the European Union. BDS stands for Boycott, Divest and Sanction. Now, Fiona, welcome. My first question is, well, the obvious one. Could you, in a few words, summarize what BDS stands for, the campaign? Where does it come from? And where are we at the moment?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me for this interview. I'm really glad to be here. So, what does BDS stand for? For more than 70 years, Israel has denied Palestinians their fundamental rights and has refused to comply with international law. Israel maintains a regime of settler colonialism, apartheid, and military occupation over the Palestinian people. This is only possible because of international complicity. Government failed to hold Israel to account, while corporations and institutions across the globe help Israel to oppress Palestinians. Because those in power refuse to act and to stop this injustice, Palestinian civil society has called for a global citizens' response of solidarity with the Palestinian struggle for freedom, justice, and equality. The BDS call was launched in 2005 by the broadest coalition in Palestinian society. It is inspired by decades of Palestinian popular resistance against Israel's apartheid, settler colonialism, and occupation regime, but also by the South African anti-apartheid movement or the US civil rights movement. It calls for boycotts, divestments, and sanctions, BDS, as a form of non-violent pressure on Israel apartheid. Boycotts involve withdrawing support from Israel's apartheid regime, complicit Israeli sporting, cultural, and academic institutions, and from all Israeli and international companies engaged in violation of Palestinian human rights. Divestments campaign urge banks, local councils, churches, pension funds, and universities to withdraw investment from the state of Israel and all Israeli and international companies that help to sustain Israeli apartheid. And finally, sanctions campaign pressure government to fulfill their legal obligation to end Israeli apartheid and not aid or assist its maintenance by banning business with illegal Israeli settlements, ending military trade and free trade arguments, and as well as suspending Israel's participation and membership in international forums such as the UN or even the FIFA.
Thank you already for this good introduction. Could you already cite us some successes that the BDS campaign has had in the sports or in culture or academics? Some examples.
Sure. So the BDS movement turned 70 years old earlier in July. And if we take a look back, there are actually too many successes to recite here, but I can kind of outline the major one. I would say that one of the recent and major milestones is definitely the Amnesty International report, concluding that Israel's cruel system of racial domination over the entire Palestinian people constitutes the crimes of apartheid. The BDS movement has been at the core of the Palestinian anti-apartheid movement for years, and now we are witnessing history in motion and action. Major TV network personalities, music icons like John Legend, Steve Rogers, or Snoop Dogg, star athletes in leading football club in the UK, particularly athletes of color, writers as Nobel Prize of Literature like Annie Ernaux or Sally Rooney, Hollywood celebrities like Susan Sarandon, Viola Davis, John Legend, John Cusack, Wentworth Miller, Mark Ruffalo, Emma Watson, Natalie Portman, all have expressed solidarity like never before. Some of them tweeted the famous disappearing map of Palestine under gradual settler colonialism, or refused to perform in events that are subsidized or sponsored by the Israeli state, its lobby groups, or complicit cultural institutions. You have the Dock Workers Union in Oakland, California, in Durban, South Africa, or in Italy that have heeded appeal by Palestinian trade unions and declared support for refusing to handle Israeli ships. In Oakland last year, with a huge support of the community of Oakland, the trade unions there succeeded in making an Israeli ship turn around after failing to offload for days. It was during the military aggression in May 2021. Over the last few years, thousands of student unions, LGBTQI+ groups, and social justice movements across the world have also endorsed BDS accountability measure. Massive sovereign funds, as the major one in Norway, Luxembourg, Netherlands, New Zealand, and elsewhere, have divested from Israeli or international companies and banks that are implicated in Israeli occupation. Mainstream churches in South Africa have endorsed BDS, while major churches in the US and in the UK divested from complicit companies and or Israeli banks. The city of Dublin in 2018 became the first European capital to adopt BDS, with tens of other cities and hundreds of cultural institutions and public space across Europe that have declared themselves Israeli apartheid-free zone. BDS has won endorsement of major international trade union federations, from South Africa to Latin America, India, Europe, Canada, Australia recently, United States, representing tens of millions of workers. BDS campaigns have also forced the large French company Veolia, for example, to abandon its illegal Israeli project after losing over 20 billion, with a B, in tenders worldwide over a 7-year period of campaign. Other complicit companies such as Heidelberg Cement, Caterpillar, G4S, Orange, among others, suffered various levels of reputational damage, divestments, or loss of tender due to BDS campaigning. The UN database of companies implicated in Israeli legal settlements enterprises have also started to feel the heat, and so have other companies that we are targeting right now in campaign, as HP, as CAF, as AXA Insurance, as the sport brand Puma, as Siemens for its involvement in gas extraction from Palestinian water, among others. So it's kind of a short list of some successes. We don't call it really victories, because the victory is actually to achieve freedom, justice, and equality, but it's major successes, definitely.
Well, before we go take a look at the future, for future plans for campaigns, we have to go, of course, your campaign has to take into account that Israel, State of Israel, the occupation forces are not idly standing by. Mainly what we saw, and we reported on this on our website as well, is attempts to delegitimate the BDS campaign, for example, to say criticism of Israel equates anti-Semitism. And there are several parliaments, there are several states, for example, in the US, who are already trying to make BDS actions illegal. Mainly, what is the strategy of BDS against these attempts?
Well, the BDS movement stands for freedom, justice, and equality. BDS is inclusive and categorically opposed, as a matter of principle, all forms of racism, including Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. BDS campaign targets the Israeli state because of its responsibility for serious violation of international law, for being involved in war crimes, in crimes against humanity perpetrated against indigenous Palestinians for decades. BDS targets the companies and institutions that participate in and are complicit in this violation from Israel. The BDS movement does not boycott or campaign against any individual or group simply because they are Israeli. In other words, BDS targets complicity, but never identity. The fraudulent and weaponized charge of anti-Semitism is used to try to silence advocates of Palestinian rights. Dozens of progressive Jewish groups reject this cynical conflation between Israel and its racist ideology, Zionism, on the one hand, and Jewish person on the other hand. They see the struggle against real anti-Semitism, which is racism, hate, discrimination directed at Jews for being Jews, as organically connected and intersecting with struggle against all forms of racism. Real anti-Semitism is on the rise, and we know that, along with other forms of racism around the globe, and especially Islamophobia. The far right and white supremacists play the leading role in promoting actually anti-Jewish racism. The BDS movement stands with progressive Jewish group and all anti-racist partners in constantly fighting against all forms of racism. Actually, Israeli apartheid regime and its anti-Palestinian allies are intentionally conflating opposition to Israeli oppression with anti-Jewish hate and weaponizing unfounded smears of anti-Semitism to push us all on a defensive posture. The intent is to divert energies and resources away from solidarity in ending complicity in Israeli regime of oppression. And for us, and for the BDS movement, the best way to respond to this attack is to continue to simultaneously defend our right to freedom of expression and against anti-democratic repression, while being very vigilant about keeping our movement free of all forms of racism, including anti-Jewish racism, and pushing forward for effective strategic BDS campaign.
Okay, well said. Fiona, could you, to wrap up our conversation, could you tell us a bit about the plans for the future in the campaign, as far as you can say that, because the enemy is listening too as well, of course.
Sure. I mean, I will not enter into much detail about how we strategically organize the campaign, but definitely there are like many campaigns that are ongoing, targeting various companies for being complicit. The last one is the campaign calling the boycott of Siemens, which is involved in extraction of gas from disputed land and passing by the Sea of Gaza. I would say the major campaign right now, it's definitely the UN Investigate Apartheid. We see and we observe actually history in motion and action recently. Not last year, actually in June, the Parliament of Catalonia have voted a motion acknowledging the fact that Israel was committing the crime against humanity of apartheid and calling for its government and the Spanish government to end to maintain relation and help to sustain the Israeli apartheid, which is one of the first European parliaments to do that, actually. And a week after, Razem Party, which is a political party in Poland, also support BDS movement and decided to enter in BDS campaigns. So we see actually more and more countries, partly from the global south, from South Africa to Namibia, Malaysia, Indonesia, etc., that are like supporting more and more a call to dismantle apartheid, and also acknowledging the fact that sanction worked on apartheid South Africa. And so we need sanction to stop apartheid in Israel. So that's kind of the major new things coming. But of course, definitely the campaign against AXA for its investments in Israeli banks that are complicit with illegal settlements are still ongoing. The Puma campaign for its participation in sponsoring football team in settlements are also ongoing. The campaign against HP, G4S for the complicity in the military system of Israel, fight against Pegasus from the NSO group that are spying activists, human rights activists and opposition governments everywhere in the world, including in Europe. So yeah, there are many different campaigns, and for the BDS movement, it's also super important to work intersectionally with other groups, whatever anti-racist, anti-colonial, LGBTQI+ groups, because at the end of the day, it's fighting oppression everywhere.
Fiona, thank you very much. As a personal end note, I myself, as a young activist in the 70s and the 80s, I can remember those days. I was an activist against apartheid in South Africa. We were posting on supermarkets and so on, and people were saying, well, okay, forget it. It's never going to end. It did happen. And it did happen unexpectedly, well, in certain circumstances. But it is my sincere wish that I can still live the day that there will be a free Palestine, a solution for all people that live there. Let's not forget it, for all people that live there. And we will keep informing on our website on the BDS campaign. Whenever you have information for us, please, you're welcome. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Lord.
Yes, and thank you, followers of the Wereld Morgen. Don't forget to support us or to push the button to subscribe on our YouTube account. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.